What is marriage? I know we've been bombarded lately by the question, what is a woman? And to be fair, that's a supremely important question. But the next question that follows, by extension, is what is marriage? If we cannot answer any of these fundamental questions as a society, we need to figure out our identity. We need identity to communicate, to build, to survive. Literally, if as a society we can't say what a woman is or a man is or a marriage is, how can we possibly have children that make sense of this world? This is a really big problem. So today we continue to look at all of these questions as fundamental to our meaning and purpose in life. Why does marriage contain so many symbols? Rice, rings, vows, etc. We could go on and on. For instance, do you know why rice is thrown at a wedding after the ceremony? Some people do. I've come across a bunch of people who don't know. Rice symbolizes the fertile seed that you hope comes from a marriage. It really does. Go and look it up. May your children bear forth like the grains of rice in the soil, numerous and healthy, growing strong and plentiful. Yeah, that's the symbol of rice. What about the ring? I have this gold ring that my wife gave me on our wedding day. This ring is a symbol of eternal promise. It's a circle because there's no beginning and there's no end. And the wedding promise is as long as this life, as long as the vow states, till death do us part, sickness, health, rich or poorer, etc. And the ring is made of this precious metal that shows no matter what corrosion comes to this relationship, the purity of the covenant continues. And we haven't even arrived at the spiritual connection. The spiritual connection of marriage from the very beginning, from God's design in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. God made Adam male. He made Eve female, male and female. He created them and they were good, and they were made to procreate, to go forth and multiply. And it wasn't good for Adam to be alone, which is why God created Eve, and that kids need a mother and a father, because Adam and Eve are procreating and creating this family unit, the building block of literally all of society for literally all of human history. And these society units need to be built on values of truth and morality and faith. And perhaps the biggest symbol of all is that God uses marriage to define his relationship with the church and with humanity. From the beginning in the Garden of Eden all the way till the end, the church is the bride of Christ. God shows us that marriage here on earth is a symbol of how much he loves us and cares for us and gave himself up for us through Jesus' life and death and resurrection. So when the culture says marriage is not anymore between a man and a woman who are committed to life, to be together, to raise a family and morals, values, and faith, but instead the culture says that marriage can be, well, literally anything your imagination can fathom, then marriage is just meaningless. It's not redefining marriage, it's just obliterating the idea of marriage. If marriage is not a man and a woman creating a family, then marriage has no meaning. It just like The Incredibles. If marriage means everything, then marriage just means nothing. Marriage is literally rendered sterile, just like so many of these medical procedures that we're seeing performed on little children. There can be no fruit. So what is the point of this culture war? To remove God, to sterilize humanity, and this path leads only to death and destruction. And we see this playing out every single day more and more as the culture accepts all of these ideas with apparently little pushback. Friends, family, believers, we must push back. We must stand against this sterile and impotent culture and instead stand up for the truth of Jesus, the truth of relationship, the truth of marriage and family. Without these things, there can be no future. Now let's get to current events. Thanks for being here and being part of Church Public. I really appreciate you being part of this community. Your time is valuable and I want to honor that. So we're going to talk about marriage and family and some of the weird things that culture is doing here on the show today. If you haven't already, like and subscribe, whether you're on YouTube or whether you're on Apple or Spotify or anywhere you're listening to this. I really appreciate it. If you want to like, subscribe, give a rating. If this is helpful in some way to you, hit that little share button and shoot it off to one of your friends or someone you don't even know. Just pick a random person in your phone book. Anyway, I just want people to understand what is going on in this culture, because apparently people just don't get it. And I want to help bring awareness as much as I can. So I really appreciate your help in that. I appreciate you listening. Audio listeners, I love you. And I really thank you for listening. If you want to see any of these things, and we'll look at a couple of videos today that you may want to see, you can navigate to churchpublic.com/podcast for the video there. Or of course, YouTube, if they still allow my video, which sometimes they do. Anyway, let's get to some of the current events. All right, so we're going to talk about Ukraine and the war. I don't know where to put this, but the war in Ukraine is going poorly. So the obvious, logical next step is to legalize gay marriage. No, I'm not kidding. That's actually what they're doing. They are working on legalizing same-sex marriage amid the crazy war and all the things that are going on there. So they have the way it works in Ukraine. Apparently, you do this petition or something, and as soon as you get enough on the petition, then you are allowed. The president has to evaluate it and decide what he's going to do. So this, according to BBC News, the petition in Ukraine is calling for same-sex marriage to be legalized and has gained enough signatures for the president to consider this proposal. And Zelensky now has apparently 10 days to respond to this. One LGBT organization has described the petition as, quote, an important moment for members of the community. They continued on and said, all married couples have these rights. We really hope that same-sex marriage will be legalized so people will be able to take care of each other, end quote. I'm just going to keep going because as we talked about in the open, that's not exactly how marriage works. And for marriage to be a marriage, it has to produce something. And unfortunately, same-sex marriage actually cannot physically produce anything. It just can't. You can take care of each other. You can be nice to each other. You can maybe even love each other in certain ways. But by definition, it is sterile and can't move forward. And we'll actually have some stories about that today. And from a government perspective, government can treat people well, treat people equally without redefining the whole idea of marriage. Though more and more this redefinition seems to be key to the agenda, which to me makes it clear the agenda is not actually about marriage, but about God. All right, second story today that we need to look at is these, they keep bringing these people to the Senate. So let me get the name of this person. I believe it was yesterday. This person was invited to the Senate, and this person is the president of the National Women's Law Center. Her name is Fatima Goss Graves, and she was asked the question on everybody's mind. This is the question on everybody's mind, isn't it? What is a woman? Because this person, Miss Graves, is literally the president of the National Women's Law Center. It has women in the title. So you'd think this would be an easy question. Let's see how this goes.
Okay, earlier this year, our newest Supreme Court Justice, Ketanji Brown Jackson, was asked what a woman is, and she had a difficult time defining that. Since you are the president of the National Women's Law Center, I was hoping that you could define what a woman is for us in this committee hearing.
Well, as the president of the National Women's Law Center, you can imagine I say woman a lot. In my day job.
Okay, so I'm just asking for the definition.
So what I'll tell you is I am a woman. That's how I identify.
Okay.
But I wonder, however, if in part the reason that you're asking a question is that you're trying to suggest that people who
I am
don't
simply asking the
identify as
question,
women
and I
can't
simply
be
want an
pregnant.
answer.
And so I think it's actually really important to be very clear here that there are people who identify as non-binary. I think
Okay.
about
all right.
5% of young
We're not
people
going to go
do,
there. I was hoping
who
maybe
can
you would.
be
I was
pregnant.
hoping that maybe you would say something that maybe you learned in high school biology that has to do with X and Y chromosomes, but which define male and female. But I guess we're not going to get there.
Well, I don't
so-
think that's the legal.
So as you see, this new LGBTQAAIP #$ cult cannot say what a woman is, because to admit what a woman is, biologically, spiritually, naturally, otherwise, would admit that their whole house of cards is based on some idea that actually isn't rooted in reality. As we saw the other day with some of the pro-abortion advocates, this law professor from Berkeley, who really wanted everybody to believe that men could have babies. And you can go back and look at that if you missed that clip on previous Church Public episodes at churchpublic.com. It's if it wasn't so sad and tragic in literally destroying the definition of marriage and family and woman and man, it would be kind of funny. that they can't answer this question. They just really can't, because it would show the whole hand. It would show everything, and they can't do it. And so there's just another example. And just as to be fair to both sides here, if that's possible, I guarantee what you'll see on all the main news today is that List Lady owned that senator with her amazing rhetoric of "I'm not going to answer your question." this whole idea of being owned, like to own someone, in other words, to win an argument, I think you actually have to participate in the argument. To say I choose to not participate in your argument with your argument is actually not participating in the argument. And these are just like, it's crazy to me. I got asked to teach a logic class the other day, and I don't know if I'm gonna have time to do it. I hope I will, but it's just in the basic rules of logic to argue in an argument. You have to argue in the argument. That's why there are so many fallacies, logical fallacies that exist, like an ad hominem, which means a personal attack. So if you're talking in a dialogue and debating a topic, and then one of the people in the argument says, "Well, you're ugly," that has nothing to do with the dialogue, nothing to do with the debate. It's an ad hominem. It's a personal attack meant to deflect the whole argument into a different direction. And there are tons of these fallacies that exist, and these logical debate tactics that exist, and people use them. But if you're having a conversation and saying, "Hey, here's a question," and you say, "Yeah, but the ocean is cold sometimes," great. That doesn't matter. Like the other day in the law professor's answer, she was like, "Well, I'm answering a more interesting question to me." I don't care what question you're answering. I want you to answer the question that was asked. All right, we're going to move on to this. And unfortunately, we're going to have to move on to a really sad story. And this one really is just one of the saddest stories that I've seen in a long time. And I'm going to try to make it through. I'll just show you this. But at a public hearing last Friday in Florida, 17-year-old Chloe Cole is a detransitioning teenager from California, and she recounted how she underwent the experimental gender medicalization and was incapable of comprehending what the drugs and surgeries would do to her body. And I just want you to hear a little bit of her story, because this is what we're doing to children, and it is heartbreaking. And you need to hear from her perspective how this went.
I don't know if I'll be able to fully carry a child, and I might be at increased risk for certain cancers, namely cervical cancer. And because I do not have my breasts, I no longer have breasts. I'm not able to breastfeed whatever future children I have. That realization actually was one of the biggest things that led to me realizing that this was not the path that I should have taken.
Listen, if you're not watching and you're just listening, to see the look on this poor broken girl's face is the most tragic thing. Like it seriously is heartbreaking, because of the damage that people have done to her, that tricked her into this, convinced her that doing these transitions, these medical changes, would solve all of her problems, and they clearly didn't. And you can see even that moment when she realizes, like, even if she chooses to be a mother, even if she can be a mother, she'll never be complete in that, because of the changes that were done to her. And it just is tragic what we're doing, and we have to keep talking about this so that we can get people to stop doing this craziness and this experimentation on these poor children. Like it's tragic, it's infuriating, and we've got to make aware that this is not without it's permanent, and it has lasting consequences that will last. Like, for instance, this poor girl will be affected by this for the rest of her life. And story after story after story. We can't let this get swallowed up into the statistics of how many children are going through these procedures, and how many government officials are trying to push these procedures on people across the country in the interest of making their lives better. And it just, it doesn't go that way, and it really is tragic. We have to keep talking about this. The New York Post profiled another detransitioner, a 31-year-old man named Brian Wagner, who lived as a woman for nearly a decade, presenting as Brianna. He began reintegrating with his birth sex in February and was described as emerging from his trans identity as leaving the twilight zone, and the rest of society is still in it. Those were his words. He says, basically, it was like medical professionals cheering on a girl with bulimia for puking up her lunch when her ribs are already poking out, he told the New York Post, speaking of the estrogen he was given for several years. He went on to say, and this is a really strong statement, but this is important. He said, my therapist really was an activist who also happened to be a psychologist. That's what I'm seeing a lot of. This person, Wagner, nailed it on the head here. We have all these psychologists, or apparently, or medical professionals, or who knows, who are really just activists wanting to press this agenda, and leaving these poor souls just destroyed in their wake. And it really is tragic. All right, we're going to continue on a couple more stories because we're talking about marriage and family today, and so this is important. This story is a little bit weirder, but we're just going to get to it. So, in New York, according to Pink News, a lesbian couple are suing a gender clinic over the wrong gender baby. So I'm just going to call them Heather and Robbie, apparently, because that's what this post is saying from the New York Post as well. Heather Wilhelm Rotenberg said she would only have kids with her wife, Robbie, if they could have girls due to past sexual assault trauma. So according to the New York Post, Buffalo-based lesbian couple is suing the CNY fertility clinic for allegedly giving them the wrong embryo. Let me skip through this. They explicitly requested they have a baby daughter after going fertility treatments. She said, Heather said, I looked at Robbie and said, what if it's not yours? Who is in my body? That's when I flipped out. That's when I felt my body was taken hostage, Heather told Amy Klein at the New York Post. I assumed it was someone else's embryo, not the wrong embryo of ours. She went on to say, I don't know how to explain this. It felt like there was an alien living inside of me. I said to Robbie, if this is someone else's kid, we have to give it back. Robbie commented, even though I don't have Heather's trauma and re-traumatization, it was hard for me to connect to the child she's talking about. She went on to say, it's not only about the in utero birth experience, it's about the socialization that a boy has in the world, even while we fight against these social norms, the repeated narratives of forced masculinity, and we did not sign up for that. So do you, I mean, there's so many things going on with this story that these ladies, who clearly could not have a baby on their own because that's just not how biology works, that's what we're talking about, ordered a baby, mail order, and when the baby came, it was not the baby they wanted, so they literally wanted to give it back. Just like getting the wrong hamburger in a drive-thru or something, because it's just a commodity. It's just, I ordered this on the internet and it came, and I want to return it to the internet because it's not the right thing. I mean, it's such a consumeristic mindset. And it really, like, we have to unpack the layers of this and realize the heart level here of that's why we started with marriage and family. When marriage and family is ordered correctly in a biblical world order, even if you don't believe in the Bible, in a natural world order, then babies occur because of procreation, and you are granted this precious gift by God of this baby. When you subvert that whole order and weird things happen, like you get the wrong gender baby because you have genetically engineered a baby, and then complain that you got the wrong baby, like this is the world that we're in. And this leads to really, really terrible decisions. In fact, on a separate research project, I'm working on Frankenstein because this is literally the story of Frankenstein. You create life where there was no life and then look at it and go, oh no, what have I created? That is the story of Frankenstein. This is the story of Frankenstein. And we keep doing this again. We're cutting up people and telling them you need to be different. So we're going to literally carve you into a different person. we're mail ordering babies and pretending this is normal, and you just create babies out of nothing, and then we look and go, oh no, what did I create? Like, is anyone recognizing this? This is the story of Frankenstein, and we just think, okay, that's just normal, that's just what we do now. No, 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 no. So this is the last statement in this article that I read from these two ladies who mail order genetically created a baby that they didn't want, but now apparently kind of like. They say, quote, "We both love our child, but," and by the way, I'm gonna pause there. I'm gonna come back. If you say you love your child, but whatever comes after that is wrong. I mean, you need to love your child. We all struggle. I have lots of childs, and they're frustrating. And I love them to the moon and back, and to my own death. I would sacrifice my life for them without a heartbeats of second. No problem. So their statement is, we love our child, but we've had to work harder, and anyone should have to work to make sure we are all alive. That is a crazy, weird statement. And again, a statement about Frankenstein's monster. It's a statement about this thing that you create, and now you have to keep alive, rather than going through the natural process of creating a child and procreating with a husband and wife and baby. And yes, it's difficult. I'm not alleviating that. But the beauty, the wonder, the majesty of life, and the fact that a woman is able to create life because of God's providence on us as human beings is the most incredible miracle really this life has to offer. And to subvert that and play God and play Dr. Frankenstein and create Frankenstein's monster and then go, oh no, what have we created, is the horror that comes out of this, that Mary Shelley shows in her horror book, Frankenstein and Frankenstein's monster and this Prometheus story. Anyway, I'll get into that later in another episode if you're interested in a deep dive on that. This is a culture where consent is the only virtue. This is what I've talked about for a long time now. What we talk about, that the only virtue is consent. It doesn't matter who you're related to or who you have relations with. The only thing that matters is consent, which is why we're seeing more and more and more this rise of older men wanting younger children, and this trans shenanigans, and this drag queen story hour, and all the other things that come with it. Because consent is all that matters. If you think it's okay, it's okay. It doesn't matter what you do. That is just a terrible value, first of all, but it leads to this, that consent culture is your prime level of culture, so babies become the product of it, which is why you get both sides of this. You get mail order babies because it's just consent. The baby doesn't have to consent because it's not a real person, because babies aren't people. And that's what we see on the other side in abortion. Babies aren't people. So if you don't want the baby, just get rid of the baby. It's not a person. It doesn't matter. And if you want the baby, it's great. You just order one and it comes to your house, except it's the wrong one. So you just get rid of it and order another one. This is the culture that we're creating. And this has terrible, terrible consequences in transhumanism, in trans culture, in just no value on human life. Removing God, creating your own reality, and saying, well, I am God, so I can create life, I can destroy life. If you don't just, you probably maybe skimmed, read the Cliff's Notes on Frankenstein when you were in high school. If you want an assignment, go and read the book again and be horrified as you draw parallels to what is going on in culture today. It's quite a read, but just go back and read it again. Even skim the Cliff Notes again and just look at it and look at what happens when Dr. Frankenstein creates the monster, and the carnage and the horror that come out of it when you play God and you take the place of woman. Because really what that book is about, it's heralded as this book of, I didn't mean to get into this today, but I'll just do a little bit. It's heralded as this feminist movement where, women are empowered and things like that. But that's not really what this book is about. This book is really about a man taking the place of a woman. The woman is supposed to give birth. The woman is supposed to create life. That's the created order, the natural order, the biblical order, God's order, however you want to put that. Instead, in Frankenstein, the man creates life, and life goes terribly, terribly wrong and ends up murdering people. And it just is chaos and destruction. This is what we're doing. And Mary Shelley, whether or not she fully understood this, there's a lot there. But this is actually what the book is about. It's about man taking the place of woman. Have we heard that theme lately? And trying to create life and it going terribly, terribly wrong. So I have one more story for you today that is kind of connected to this. And I have a lot more to say too than I'm going to have time today, but I'm just going to introduce it quickly and then probably revisit it in the future because I have a lot of thoughts about it. But Jordan Peterson and Dave Rubin, oops, I hit the wrong one, sorry. Jordan Peterson and Dave Rubin had this conversation on the Daily Wire, and the conversation was a really weird conversation. So you don't know, Jordan Peterson is a pop psychologist who has gained a lot of interest and fame because he really speaks to men, and he actually does a lot of good in speaking to men and saying, men, like, stand up, stand straight, like be a force to be reckoned with in the world, because the culture is saying that men are evil and toxic masculinity and no good can come from being a man. Unless you're a man that becomes a woman, that's a whole other topic. So he's gained fame as that, and he's a psychologist, and he brings psychology to it. He's definitely not a Christian, though he does delve into some Christian values here and there. He's definitely not a Christian, at least not yet. We can pray for him. Dave Rubin is a liberal commentator who had a great awakening, red pill, as some people call it, and became sort of conservative on some things. He also is gay and married to a man, and they recently they didn't adopt two children. I don't know what to say. They brought two children into the world, talking about Frankenstein. The two of them, and I talked about this on a couple episodes ago if you want to listen to more of it, but the two of them took their seed and fertilized it with a random person's egg and then put those two seeds in two other random women, and then they got two babies out of it. That's the clearest way I can explain it, and if that sounds wacky, I'll just leave it at that. So that's these two people, and they had a conversation. And their conversation is about a couple of different things, but here's what I drew from it. And again, I'm going to get into more of this because there's some clips that I want to show you to hear from their words and kind of unpack it and walk through it. But a lot of their conversation starts out about how transing the kids is really, really bad, which I agree with. Transing the kids is really, really bad. We should stop doing this. I just played you that detransition story, and like the first time I watched it, I'll be honest, I cried. Like it broke my heart for this poor girl. I'm even thinking about it now. I'm not going to think about it anymore. That's bad. And then in almost the same sentence, they talk about why gay marriage is good, because it's like regular marriage, but you still need a mother and a father, but one of the partners can act like a mother even if they're not a mother, and one of the partners can act like a father, or they can switch that around and they can kind of figure out how that works. And it's like doing a scientific experiment in real life in real time. Like that's really how they talk about this, and it's really a bizarre conversation from that perspective. And then they talk about how bringing babies into the world, and Rubin even admits, like, two gay men can't bring a baby into the world, and they talk about this because it's not possible. And then they discuss why making a baby from the two gay married dads with two surrogate moms is good, but also not normal, but also good for society. And here's where I've got to go with this. And I'm sure I'll get demonetized and deplatformed and canceled for all this. They cannot see that one, gay marriage is not conservative. It's just not. It's obviously not biblical as well, but neither of these guys are professing Christians, so I can't judge them on that, but it's just not conservative. Like, the family unit is the family unit. We started talking about marriage, and that's why we talked about marriage. But they cannot see, neither of these guys, apparently, who say some good things about conservative ideology. But in this instance, they are so blind, it's very interesting to watch. And again, I'm going to get some clips and bring them for you, but I wanted to talk about this in the context of marriage and family and kids that we're talking about. They can't see that they're doing the exact same thing as transing the kids by replacing the created order and trying to make a man into a woman biologically, which you can do as many surgeries as you want. It's not possible. They're trying to replace the created order of husband and wife creating through natural biology, and instead The replacement is Reuben and his male partner, who they admit can't make babies, play God by scientifically creating babies in the very same way that science is trying to make men into women. This is not conservative. It's not biblical. And ultimately, this is what, like, it's mind bending to me. They can't see that both of these paths lead to the same place. Transing the kids leads to the place of you playing God, creating Frankenstein's monster, and then going, oh no, what have I done? Two gay men creating babies, getting to the end and leading to, oh my God, what have I done? I mean, it's the same thing. And sure, they may be nice people and they may try to raise the babies. I'm not saying they're going to be abusive or weird or anything like that, but morally, biologically, you're leading to the same place. You're not inculcating faith and values and morals into your children. Because what are you going to teach your children then? Are you going to teach your children that they should be gay and therefore they should create children out of the lab as well? Like, where does this go? And it all goes to the same place. And it's interesting to me that they can't see it. So these are the true things that we have to say against the lies that say you can do whatever you want, you can be whoever you want, family is whatever you want it to be, marriage is whatever you want it to be, kids are whatever you want them to be. No, none of these things are true. Family is what family is. Marriage is what marriage is. Male and female, God created them. Go forth, be fruitful, and multiply. Even Jesus in Matthew 19 talks about what God has put together, let no man separate in terms of marriage, male and female creating babies. This is what we have known even for all of human history. And yes, people have done the wrong thing, the bad thing, but that's not the norm. That's not the standard that God created. And we need to look back to that and follow that. And unfortunately, we're off in the weeds and doing all kinds of things. So that leads us to the verse of the day. And thanks for being with me till the end. The verse of the day is Jesus out of Matthew 10:39 that says, whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. Because what is this telling us? This is talking about who you serve. Are you serving yourself? Are you trying to follow your own path? Are you creating life and taking the place of God? Or are you giving up your life to Jesus, who fills you with his life? Are you living according to your standard, or are you living according to God's standard? And just for a little bit more context in this, Jesus says, verse 37, anyone who loves his father and mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves his son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And anyone who does not take up his cross daily and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. And that's really what we're talking about today. That's why we're ending here on this verse, to know that your life is not your own. It was bought with a price. If you're following Christ, then you have to follow Christ, and you have to live according to him. If you want to live in the world, live in the world. If you want to do whatever you want, do whatever you want. But no, that has consequences. That's why we look at the story of this poor girl, because there are consequences to your actions. They're not without consequence. They don't lead to this imaginary utopia, this paradise on earth. That's not how this whole thing works. You can pretend there's no God. You can rebel against God. You can go your own way, but ultimately that way leads to a place that is full of death and destruction, and I'm not sure you're going to like the direction that goes. I want to help you understand God so that you can follow after him, follow after Jesus with your heart and soul and mind and strength and everything you have, and rebel against this world that wants to take you down this dark path, and instead follow after Jesus and do that with all that you have. I hope that you do that today. I hope that you follow after Christ today. And thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it. God bless. And as always, keep the faith.